Hello, beautiful black people. I hope that all is well in your world today. And this beautiful day is becoming a very, very successful day for you and all of your wonderful, wonderful, intelligent black loved ones. The question still is, and probably always will be, how did those white folks get so rich? How did they get so rich? Think of this. Consider this, my beautiful, intelligent black brothers and sisters. That good old boy network, inheritance, grandfather clauses, subprime mortgages, sharecropping, the heads rights movement. That's a big one. It's called the heads rights movement. It benefited white folks. Slavery benefited white folks. Jim Crow benefited white folks. How about the black tax? Did you know about that one? It was the black tax assessed on black folks by white folks. Immigration, predatory lending, forced consumerism, forcing black folks to spend money with them. White domestic terrorism. That's still happening today in 2020. The Homestead Act. Land giveaways to white folks. Social Security was for white folks. Minimum wage laws to marginalize black folks economically. Public housing to herd black folks into projects, performing a project on black folks. Just a few things that I want you to consider when the question is asked, how did those white folks become so rich? Know this, my beautiful, intelligent black brothers and sisters. Donald Trump is probably the most effective president ever. And here's why. I will tell a story. And at the end of this story, which will be the end of this content, I think you will understand what I mean when I say Donald Trump is probably the most effective president ever. When these two white boys retired from the slave trade, their names were Isaac Franklin and John Armfield. When they retired from the transatlantic slave trade, they had amassed a fortune worth billions of dollars in today's dollar value. They amassed that fortune by building a business that was essentially the Amazon of slave selling. It was the Amazon of slave selling. They did not grow anything. These two white boys, John Armfield and Isaac Franklin, did not grow anything, nor did they participate in the transatlantic slave trade wholeheartedly, entirely. Rather, the two tycoons had a series of huge concentration camps like pens, P-E-N-S, and literal dungeons where they kept their human chattel, similar to Amazon's warehouses today. They had headhunters who purchased their product from other slave owners and distributed the enslaved Africans throughout the deep South for a profit. They maximized their profit by packing their human cargo into ships like sardines for short journeys from Virginia to ports in the deep South. They made their property walk hundreds of miles in caravans. They herded their property into cages because Franklin and Armfield were only temporary owners of what they called then their merchandise. They were even crueler, C-R-U-E-L-E-R, than men who were known as the eviliest of slave masters. They beat the men and joked about raping the black women. By the end of their careers, Isaac Franklin and John Armfield were two of the richest men in the entire nation. Perhaps no organization in history made more money selling slaves than the Franklin and Armfield firm. They were diabolically depraved human beings who was known for their cruelty, who was known for their uncaring nature and their cold-heartedness. Their cold-heartedness. That has been passed down through many generations of white folks. Take a look at Trump and his cold-heartedness. Take a look at the lily white Republican Party and its cold-heartedness. These people were cruel people, but they were very, very effective, my beautiful, intelligent black brothers and sisters. Trump is a bumbling idiot. The world knows that. Trump is a bumbling idiot who has failed at everything he has ever tried to do. While he is known for his business accuracy, his business success, he has filed for bankruptcy more times than Wesley Snipes. More times than Blockbuster Video. He has filed for bankruptcy more times than Tom's from MySpace and the creator of the Shake, Weight combined. Trump's presidency has been a dumpster fire, fueled by extortion, ineptitude, racism, and outright lies. He has emboldened white supremacists. He has shredded the Constitution. He has subverted democracy. He has endangered the media. He has undermined congressional checks and balances and destroyed many Americans' faith in the presidency. But Trump is damn effective in what he's doing. If someone had invented a Terminator robot with the express purpose of dismantling the foundation of the Constitution while safeguarding white supremacy, while safeguarding white supremacists' 400-year championship streak, STREAK, there would be many contenders, but Trump is not the first. He is just the most blatant and the latest iteration in the evolution of presidential malfeasance, presidential corruption, presidential crime from the white boy house. Perhaps Richard Nixon would be the first generation prototype that combined all the desperate racist and anti-democratic tactics employed by previous presidential administrations. After all, it was Nixon who coalesced America's discriminatory, underhanded strategies into a cohesive plan. He wasn't the first to weaponize the criminal justice system to use against black folks, people that looked like me. In 1971, Nixon gave it a name that would be used by all future presidents: the war on drugs. He wasn't the first to capitalize off of white Southerners, white Southerners longing for slavery and Jim Crow. But he gave it a name. He called it the Southern Strategy. He wasn't the first to use racism as a dog whistle. But for the future, he perfected it for the future. Republicans, by creating a policy-driven marketing strategy, as Lee Atwater, remember that name, he was a Nixon white boy, as Lee Atwater described in 1980. You start out in 1954 by saying the N-word, by saying the N-word, by saying the N-word. By 1968, you can't say the N-word. That hurts you, backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract. Now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things that a byproduct of them is black folks get hurt worse than white folks. We want to cut this. It's much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than the N-word, the N-word. Reaganomics, remember that? advanced the strategy by introducing trickle-down supply-side economics as a political platform. But even when Reagan was demonizing poor black people as welfare queens and cutting social programs as a way to reduce spending, he didn't make his white supremacy agenda explicit. He still distanced himself from the plot to trade weapons in exchange for crack cocaine to sprinkle through black communities. Remember that? Inundating black communities with crack cocaine. Reagan was corrupt and evil, but he kept it on the down low for the sake of plausible deniability. Even when Reagan's successor, George H.W. Bush, framed a black man so the president could display a bag of crack rock cocaine during a presidential address about the problem in the ghetto. George H.W. Bush was careful to keep his anti-blackness to a high-pitched shirk that only white folks could hear. The same thing with Bill Clinton, mass incarceration, and his approval of heavy-handed prison sentences for the crime that black folks commit. George W. Bush Supreme Court aided coup, C-O-U-P, was a constitutional travesty, but at least he used America's highest court instead of Russian hackers like Trump. Barack Obama wasn't immune. He also deported undocumented immigrants, appointed drug czars who supported marijuana prohibition, and butted up with a corporate of rich white folks. But there's one category where the Obama administration ranks at the worst of all times. Unlike every president since Richard Nixon, the Obama presidency was relatively free and free of all-encompassing scandal, unless you count conservatives' unproven wet dream conspiracy theories about Hillary Clinton's email, Benghazi, wearing tan suits, or Barack and Michelle's terrorist fist bumps. That's all the racist white folks could come up with. And although we might portray Trump his egregious disregard for the truth, his decorum and laws as a bad thing, the truth is the administration is fulfilling the dreams of Republicans, ex-presidents, and politicians who have long wished someone would say, "To hell with America," and go Rambo on the Constitution. Protocol and their people who use washcloths on their legs. Trump is just better at it. When Trump jump-started his presidential campaign by demonizing Mexicans, he was honoring the long-standing tradition of the Republican Party. He simply tapped into a xenophobic ethos that allowed George W. Bush to start 2 wars, demonize Muslims, and ramp up the drug war. The infamous border wall had been bandied about Republicans for years. Trump just made it the center of his campaign strategy. When Dick Cheney see Trump using taxpayers' dollars to bolster his resort businesses, I bet he is kicking himself for not just ignoring the emoluments clause and openly funneling business to Halliburton, his company. Remember all that time Mitt Romney spent hiding his tax returns? I bet he were somewhere screaming at his advisors, I could have just said no. When George W. Bush refused to speak to the NAACP, he probably had no idea. He could have just told the nation's oldest black civil rights organization that he thought there were some very good white supremacists. Instead of creating the Willie Horton ad, the senior Bush could have just said that black folks were broke, homeless criminals, and asked America, what do you have to lose? Nixon could have avoided Watergate by defying Congress and hiding those infamous tapes. Reagan could have declared executive privilege and stopped Oliver Norton from testifying about the Iran-Contra deal. Bill Clinton should have just paid off Monica Lewinsky and declared that Special Prosecutor Kenneth Starr was perpetrating a hoax. Obama could have saved a lot of money by doing nothing to fight Ebola. Instead of acting quickly, helping the CDC create a test, closing schools, and following the advice of scientists, Obama could have eliminated H1N1 by simply spreading misinformation. Who knew? Who thought of that? Previous Republicans' efforts at voter suppression pale in comparison to Trump's public threat to halt funding if governors didn't do their best to stop people from voting. You know, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp wishes he could get all that time back he spent rigging his race against Stacey Abrams. Joe Brown, Greg Mathis, Maybelline Ephraim, and even Gabrielle Union could have all been federal court judges had Barack Obama known he could just appoint all of his homies to the federal bench, even if they were unqualified. To be fair, Gabrielle Union, judicial verdict, cute puppy versus homeless lady with decent voice, was a landmark decision for the America Got Talent court. All of those presidential briefings and fighting with the press, all of those bipartisan negotiations, all of those campaign speeches, appealing to voters, better angels. All the steps spent crossing the aisles may have produced some governance, but that Constitution adhering, truth-telling, co-equal branch governing bullshit was very time-consuming. Just as Isaac Franklin and John Umfield realized more than a century ago, Trump has shown us that evil is a much more economical approach to presiding over the White House, presiding over this country. He has shown us that evil is a much more economical approach to the presidency. He has shown us that lying is a better tactic than the truth. He has shown us that unapologetic hate is much more productive than empathy. And he has shown us that divisiveness is easier than coalition building. And apparently, for a lot of white folks, this is very attractive. Some Trump supporters are too dumb to find out the truth, but many of them don't give a damn as long as they get what they want. Who cares if people die as long as their businesses survive? They might be racist assholes, but at least they don't have to worry about that compassion, truth, and equality stuff derailing their gravy train. For these people, Trump is a hero. These people profit from Trump's evil in the same way that white folks who didn't own slaves profited from an economic buttress by free labor. All white folks profited from slavery. Who cares about the children in cages as long as whiteness prevails? Andrew Jackson might beat out Trump as the most racist president ever. Ronald Reagan may have been dumber, and Nixon may certainly have been more evil, but those chief executives hid their conspicuous candles of wickedness under bushels of genteel decorum and etiquette that arguably made them more respectable. But not Trump. Definitely not Trump. Trump has proven that he is the most effective president ever as propagating evil, as destroying the Constitution, as belittling, ignoring the rule of law, etc., etc. That's what I have on this one. Please go to thethrasherway.libsyn.com. There you will have access to all that I do. And please download, and download some more. Talk to you again on another one real soon.